going to hand over straight away to Nadia Golko, who's going to welcome everyone.
Thank you, Nikki. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the launch of the governance series. What is governance? Why is governance important? What a governance professional does in a day-to-day job? And who's responsible for good governance? These are just some of the questions that are usually asked, and many governance professionals I personally know are very keen to demystify. And partly this is why we're here today. Whether in the corporate, public or charity sector, governance is crucial to the organizational performance. And of course, governance is about setting a framework to include transparency, decision-making, sustainability, ethical corporate values, just to name a few. And also it's about understanding of the dynamics of people, culture, and of course, effectiveness within a company. But also governance is not just about past events and corporate scandals. It is very relevant today. It will always be so tomorrow. But unfortunately, awareness of what the governance function is, what the career opportunities in governance are, and how to navigate through this governance space, especially as an early career governance professional, have been an unknown area for many. And therefore, the Governance Series is a flagship event aimed at not just increasing awareness about governance, but also providing a platform for experienced governance experts. And of course, this platform will also shed light on some of the career opportunities and how the University of Lincoln MSc Governance program provides current and prospective students a headway into the industry. So, whether you're curious about some basics about what governance means, or whether you are interested to discover some fascinating stories provided from people from industry, you will find something new to explore in this career special edition. And on this note, I would like to welcome you all again to the governance, to our first event of the governance series, and I declare the governance series duly launched. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Professor Nadia Golko, for such a wonderful welcome address. Welcome to everyone. And as Professor Nadia Golko has duly launched the governance series, for this series we are focusing on career, and we are privileged to have our special guest from British Petroleum. She's in the person of Alia Fazal, who is the head of corporate governance for BP. A little introduction about Alia, we'll get to know her better. Alia leads an outstanding team of corporate secretaries. She was shortlisted for the Team of the Year at the 2022 CGI Awards. She started her training with EY on the EY graduate program, and over the past 20 years, she has worked in-house at multiple FTSE 100 companies, including Tesco, Balfour Beatty, British Land, and other companies. She was named the GovernanceTrailblazer in 2022, Governance Hot 100 list, and shortlisted for several governance awards. Alia is a regular speaker at corporate governance events, so this is not her first time speaking to such an audience. And she also supports a lot of industry activities, including policy development and guidance. Alia, welcome to the launch and the first edition of the governance series.
Well, thank you very much, Enoch, and to Nadia, and to all of you at the University of Lincoln. It's a real privilege to be able to come and speak to you all today, and hopefully, leave you something that's going to be useful and helpful to provide an insight into the career that I've had and the sort of work that I do day to day here at BP, but also drawing on the experiences that I've had, all the way back 20 years ago when I started my career at EY. On the graduate program, as Enoch mentioned, and then also through all the various companies I've worked at along the way. So thank you very much for having me.
Okay, thank you. So interestingly, we have a very diverse pool of audience. We have prospective MSc governance students, we have MSc governance students, and we also have people who are early career professionals in the governance field. So quite diversified. But my first question, which I think is my personal question to you, Governance, did you end up in governance by accident or it was by a deliberate choice?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question to ask, and I think if you speak to perhaps a lot of people of my generation, as it were, I think you'll probably find that a lot of people fell into governance. They didn't sort of choose it. They just, were starting out on one path, and then they became aware of governance, through a secondary route. But for me personally, actually, I mentioned the EY program. So I was at university studying law, and then moved to do the LPC, which is the solicitor training sort of route. And at that point, I was very interested in corporate and commercial law. That was sort of really my focus. And, I was looking to sort of become a solicitor. But at the same time, I was looking at other options as well, sort of keeping my mind open to different opportunities. But actually, the only things that I actually applied for then were solicitor roles, but then this role in governance, purposely because I recognized that, I had a real interest, a real passion around corporate law, and actually what is governance in a sort of corporate setting, as I've spent my career in, but it is a pure focus on corporate law. If you train as a solicitor, you're looking at, you have to do mandatory seat in litigation, you have to sort of look at other aspects of law depending on, the type of organization you train with. But if you're training as a governance professional, you're just doing corporate law, which is what I loved. So for me, it was great. It was a perfect combination of what I wanted to do and where my interest lay. So I very deliberately chose that. I applied for the program with EY. And nowadays, I think all the Big Four have got training programs for graduates in governance. So I think that over the years it's really expanded, but certainly at that time they were less pure governance training positions, but I was very fortunate to get the opportunity with EY, and I've never looked back since then.
So it's been over 20 years. How would you say your career has developed?
Yeah, well, I suppose that I think what's important to understand, especially at the outset of your own career, it's not necessarily completely linear. There will be times when suddenly you kind of have a jump forward, like an acceleration in terms of an opportunity or a promotion or a new role in a different company, and then perhaps things stay at a certain level for some time, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be this continuous pursuit, this sort of race to get somewhere. It's not a race. Everybody gets there in their own time, and everybody has different appetite for ambition as well. So not everybody wants to get to a certain position. So it's all very individual, and I always encourage my team here at BP and other teams I've worked with in the past, just own your journey. Just take control if you need to take control at certain points to make different decisions, but ultimately you are in control of your destiny. Nobody has to, if they're not happy in a role, you don't need to stay there. You need to think about their options. What is it that's not making you happy? What is it about the opportunity? So for me personally, I've had some absolutely incredible opportunities over the course of my career. I've worked at many sort of FTSE 100 companies over the years. So I've been very, very fortunate in the experiences that I've had. And it's about creating your own opportunities. You don't need to wait for other people necessarily to sort of offer you something on a plate. That does happen from time to time, but not necessarily always. So you've got to try and build your network, even in an organization, even as an entry level, at graduate level, get to know not only your own, obviously, line manager and operations are extremely important, but also the other managers in the department, the other people around you, and just really start to build that network from day one. Or even if you get in there, you'll sort of think, gosh, I've been here for 3 months, 6 months, and I haven't really built a network. It's never too late. Start investing in those relationships. It's only going to help you as you, seek further progression and further opportunities as you go along.
Okay, I don't know if this has really scared you. When I was going through your LinkedIn profile, one of the intriguing things I saw was your transition from one industry to another industry. I mean, it is very normal of a person's career to move from one bank to another bank, or for example, if it's in the real estate industry, to move from one company to the other. But Alia, you've done real estate, you've been in the financial sector, you've been in the grocery sector, working with Tesco, you've done pension and insurance. Did you find it easy transitioning within these industries?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think that you know, even where, say, for example, you mentioned real estate there. You know, I worked for a big FTSE 100 real estate company as it was then, and then later moved on to another FTSE 100 real estate company. So actually, yes, there were synergies there, but actually they're very unique companies. They've got a different way of referring to things, to be thinking about things. You know, one had more of a focus on retail real estate, whereas another had more of a focus on a mixed use development. So, you know, residential, office space, retail. So even though they're ostensibly in the same sector, actually there are still lots of differences. But particularly where it is, you know, industry, you know, completely different and new industries, that in itself, you know, presented a great opportunity to just learn about a new place, a new organisation. The fact that it's a different industry is another aspect, another characteristic that's different from one company to another. But in any case, as I said, even if you're working within the same, moving within the same industry, you know, you've got to get in there. You've got to start learning the language of that organization. So even things like, you know, you have your board of directors and you've got your committees, then you've got the leadership team underneath that, the executive team. In every organization, in every, you know, one of the companies I've worked for, they'll have different ways of referring to, say, that executive team. Maybe it's the leadership team, maybe it's the group executive, maybe it's something else. And if the quicker you can start learning the language of the organization, the better. And, you know, as like I said, you know, being a completely different industry is another part of that. But what I would say is really important to be able to have a very meaningful, value-adding relationship and opportunity in terms of the role that you know have as a governance professional. It's absolutely imperative to understand what the business does, what the industry does.
Yeah.
You know, you can go in and you can just be this kind of almost closet governance professional. What I mean by that is somebody that's, you know, sitting somewhere in a dusty cupboard somewhere, you know, filling in forms and processing things and not connected to the business. Is really, really important. You need to, however senior or junior you are, the more you can understand about the commercials of the business, you know, how do they make their money? You know, what is their business model? How are the different functions? Why is it set up that way? Why do we have a function that's maybe split by geographies versus business divisions? You know, looking at it really, because in a governance role, you're sitting at that kind of very, very top. You know, very sort of almost, you know, you kind of get vertigo sometimes. You're sitting right at the top of these very, very large organizations and you've got this bird's eye view. Why is the company the way it is? How is that supportive of good governance? You know, how is the information flowing up that the board and the other decision makers are getting access to the information they need? So the more you can understand about how the company works, how it's set up, how it makes money, the more you can add value as a governance professional to help then the decisions around the governance framework, for example, you know, that you can add value. And also then when you're coming to prepare and you know, attend these board meetings and do the minuting and supporting those meetings, the more you understand about the business, the more you understand what's being discussed in those meetings is going to enable you to be much more, as I said, value adding in terms of what you're, you know, contributing in your role.
Okay, so apart from this industry or company specific knowledge, what do you think is the minimum transferability skills, you know, a corporate governance professional who is looking at whether switching or transitioning to certain industries or unfamiliar path? What do you think are the skill sets that you think, yes, if I develop skill sets X, Y, Z, at least it wouldn't give you the holistic, you know, view, but it will put you in a better place to really take advantage of opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, look, it goes without saying, you need to have your technical knowledge. You know, you could be the best, you know, individual, you know, very interesting, charismatic, you know, good at influencing, all that sort of thing. But you need to have, as a governance professional, you need to have that knowledge, that credibility around the technical, you know, application of what the requirements are, the regulations. So that goes without saying, and that's going to be universal. That gives you, you know, it doesn't matter what the industry is, broadly those regulations will be the same. So if that's a given, well, what else do you need to have? And that's where, you know, you have that differentiating piece between people that are really going to have, you know, really successful careers in governance versus people that will have, you know, probably reached to a certain level and you know, perhaps not progress any further. And those sorts of things are, you know, resiliency. I mean, gosh, in our line of work as, you know, as governance professionals, you know, the sorts of things that we have to that we have to try and juggle and manage. You know,
Yeah.
It's heavy stuff. And you know, you're dealing with very senior stakeholders, you know, board members who've been at the top of their own game. You know, they're very demanding individuals. You know, they want the best. They have very high standards. So you're having to try and meet that all the time, constantly. So you need a lot of resilience internally, you know, individually, to be able to meet those demands, to be able to weather all the storms, because you know you've got a lot going on already, a very high workload, and all of a sudden there's a big M&A transaction that's landed, and that needs to be addressed. You can't sort of delay it by a week or whatever. It has to happen today, or maybe there's some other issues, whatever it is. So that resiliency, able to just get on with it and being able to kind of, you know, not sort of bottle up your emotions. That's not what resilience is about, right? But it's about kind of managing your emotions and managing, you know, your mental state, kind of keeping your mental health, looking after yourself. And, you know, at the point at which you're then responsible for a team, you know, as I am, you then need to be thinking about the resiliency of the team and the function and the individuals within that and their own individual mental health and all that sort of thing. So I think resiliency is really key. I think another thing is creativity, because, you know, we have a black and white, you know, legal regulations. We can look it up. It's all there, you know, printed out for us, what the statutes are, what the regulations are. But then actually creativity is around, well, how do we, you know, organize ourselves? You know, what does our governance framework look like so that we can address those black and white, very specific requirements to fit the business that we're working in. So, you know, like I mentioned earlier around, you need to understand your business. You know, you need to understand what your business is in terms of what it does and how it makes money, but you need to understand the culture of the business so that you take what the black and white letter of the law is and regulation is, and you're thinking creatively, okay, well, how is this going to work in this organization with this culture, with these priorities, with these things that are going on? And, you know, at any point in any project, you know, things don't always go to plan. So you need to have the creativity to think, well, how can we find a solution to the situation? How can we work around this? How can we, you know, even if you have even if you have very limited resources, I've worked in teams where we don't have very deep pockets. We can't just go out and spend a lot of money on external consultants to come up with something. You know, we need to just be very resilient and have that creativity to do it ourselves. So I would say that those are two things I'd really emphasize in terms of personal sort of skills alongside the technical piece. But of course, you know, all of the sort of usual things around influencing skills and, you know, interpersonal skills and being able to have empathy for people around you in the situations, all of those are super important as well.
So if I'm to bring you back to the application process when you were applying for some of these jobs, how do you think a governance-tailored CV should look like? What are some of the skill sets, experiences, successes? How do they communicate or sell themselves on their CV? Especially in these times we have AI, where we are told HR uses some AIs to do the sifting of the CVs and whatever. How should a winning CV look like from your experience?
Well, I mean, it's I mean, certainly, you know, my own experience was 20 odd years ago, so I think things have moved on since then. We didn't really have AI in any meaningful way. But nowadays, you know, and look, we've got our, you know, we have a graduate in our team in terms of function that we have here at BP. We're also looking to shortly open our process for our next cohort. So, well, we have a cohort of 1, you know, at any one time. And that's typical for governance teams, which is why it is difficult to get a training position, but there are positions out there. So, you know, we will be shortly launching our program to bring somebody in for September 2024. And there will be a very formal process around that. It'll be run alongside our broader graduate program recruitment selection process that we have, which will be not dissimilar to most other organisations, I would say, in terms of big, you know, sort of blue chip organisations. So, but you know, what can you do to help yourself? I think you know, a commitment to understanding legal things is always going to help. So, you know, understanding a demonstration of an interest in law and law related issues, corporate related issues. So even if you've got, you know, a non-governance background from your degree perspective, if it's, you know, history or accounting or, whatever it is. It's about drawing through the elements of your own experience that will help you as a governance professional. So that in itself will help demonstrate that you've understood what a governance professional does, and being able to draw out those synergies in terms of your own experience to being represented prominently in your application will help the reviewer, if it's an AI bot or if it's a person sifting it through manually, to just understand and pick out that this person's understood what a governance role is and has understood how their unique experiences and skills will help to benefit them in a role as a governance professional.
Sometimes when people are putting in applications for governance role and they get to the interview stage and they're asked to give, for example, can you give us an instance where you did A, B, C, D? Some say they don't know which stories about their professional life that would be of immense interest to the board or the panel of judges, because to them, they are thinking, okay, when I tell them I was able to meet all the compliance needs of my organization, that sounds basic. If I tell them I made an initiation, for example, of an idea, and it didn't result in bringing some numbers to the company, it's irrelevant. How do you think they can answer these kind of example-based questions to really make a difference, in the interview room?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, in terms of forward-looking, the more years you get into your career, the further along you get into your career, the easier it is to answer those types of questions because you have got practical examples that you worked on. At the very start, for the first role as a graduate, it's really hard. It is really hard to be thinking about, well, how do I demonstrate these things? And that, really comes back to then, okay, well, what experiences have you had in life? What do you do in your spare time? What sort of hobbies do you have? What kind of enterprises, whether it's sort of maybe volunteering or running some sort of groups or something, what is it there that you can draw on to demonstrate, your ability to work as a team, to have some leadership responsibilities, to be, demonstrating other skills, whether it's problem solving or whatever. But even if those opportunities or those examples in a candidate's experience, even if they're fairly limited, there are still things from your studies that people can draw on. Was there an opportunity for some project work? Was there a presentation you had to deliver? When was a time when perhaps you were under pressure? And I talked a bit about resiliency earlier, but there are always times when we governance professionals, we're put under pressure because we have statutory deadlines. We've got demanding board members that need what they need. So you can draw on that from your essay deadlines, from perhaps there were you can relay an anecdote where you had this pressure, whether it was an exam or a study deadline, where perhaps there were some personal issues, factors that you were having to deal with, whatever they might be, in terms of it demonstrating that you had a challenge in front of you, you had to overcome that challenge, you had to work out strategies for addressing that challenge, and then demonstrating what was the outcome. So, a clear, logical answer where the anecdote really has that relevance to the questions being asked is going to, demonstrate a degree of understanding, a degree of compatibility for the role, even if you're not able to kind of talk to, well, I've done this big governance project and I've done, this governance, whatever work, if you don't have that specific experience.
Okay. Before I move on to my next question, and for the audience, if you have any question, kindly put it in the chat, and I know Alia will be more than excited to answer your questions. Alia, my next question, when you were explaining a couple of things earlier, you mentioned about professional network. Now, some have a difficulty in, number one, building that network, and number two, how to leverage that network professionally to their advantage. Sometimes there's that feeling of, would they be open? Am I being nosy? And when is the right time to ask someone, can you give me a lead? Do you know anything? How do you build your professional network, number one, and how do you leverage this for your personal career?
Yeah, I think that it's important for it to feel authentic. It should networking should never be framed around a specific sense of, okay, I really want this from that person, and it's very transactional. It should just be really authentic, very, and it's not to say that you might not have in mind that, okay, well, if I, it would be a great idea to connect with that person because there's going to be some benefit. it's okay to have it in the back of your mind, but it shouldn't just be the only driving force for that relationship. So what I would say is, networking, right now for a lot of the audience here, you're all, in touch with people here at the University of Lincoln and, fellow students who are all currently have a degree of interest in governance. Maybe not all of you are working governance in terms of going on to further careers, but a bunch of you will. But even if for those that don't, you've already got an initial network. So this is a great starting point, because, I think back to my days at EY and my cohort when I was a graduate there, I'm still in touch with them all. And, they've all gone on to different fantastic roles in different organizations. But we have that benefit of that network where we can, speak to each other. We can ask each other questions about how are you dealing with this situation? What are you thinking about that? So right now, this is where I say your network starts. It's right now, today, the people around you, that's an opportunity. So when you get into an organization, you get your first job, you're there, great, okay. And how do you then build a network? Well, it's about, building those relationships. So setting up, one-to-one meetings as an introduction, just introduce yourself, to hear about what they do, but to share who you are and what you are looking to get out of the role, and, wanting to learn about the organization, etc. So, it's not, as I said at the outset, it's not transaction. It's not like I want to meet with you because I want to, get a promotion in 3 years' time. It's you're just meeting with them because you just want to know about them. You want to understand and connect with them as an individual, as a human being. And then it's about, okay, well, maybe, you stay in touch with them. So maybe every year or every 6 months or whatever the appropriate cadence is, you drop them a note. You just let them know that, maybe you update them on like, oh, I've just last time we spoke, I mentioned about this. I just wanted to let you know there was a successful outcome. This is what I've achieved. To just keep that sort of appropriate level of contact over a period of time. And then when the point comes that perhaps, you think that they might be able to help support you on whatever it is, whatever your goal is, then you can be naturally just sort of saying to them, well, look, an opportunity's arisen. I'd be grateful for your advice or your support in this matter. Or, is there something that you can, whatever else support they can give you that you can benefit from them. The key thing is here that when those sorts of conversations happen, i.e. when you're seeking to leverage, because, you talked about, make your network and then how do you leverage your network?
Exactly.
So when you're in that situation that you want to leverage your network, be very specific. You're not sort of saying, can you help me, or I need a job, or I want a promotion. Be specific. Say that perhaps it's something around the idea of like, well, I'm really looking to, get more experience around, board meeting, minuting experience. And actually, I understand that there might be an opportunity to do that in this business division. And, you have a key role in that business division. Is there something that, could you help me understand that a bit more? Or is there somebody that that I could speak to help me get more information? So, make it specific, make it achievable in the sense that it's something that person can manually do. Because ultimately, if you're leveraging your network, and especially, and I'm sort of talking here where perhaps sort of more senior to yourself, that if you are speaking to those senior people, they're busy people, and they want, by and large, most people want to help other people, but they're very busy. Make it specific so they can think, okay, I've got time. I can just write an email to my, colleague or whoever that I know very, very well that I can influence. Or maybe I'm meeting somebody for a coffee anyway. I'll mention it to them then. Make it nice and simple that they can try and do something which is going to be helpful. But the other thing as well I would say is that, really don't underestimate the network. It's so important to build your network. And because it's not only the sense of, okay, well, you're over time, you'll have your managers, you'll have maybe a mentor, maybe a couple of mentors, all the rest of that, but actually when it comes to making decisions about that about you, about your future, who's going to take, maybe an opportunity comes up, it's like, well, who's going to take this opportunity? What you also want in the mix are sponsors, and sponsors will be people that will just vouch for you. They'll be like, I've seen Enoch, he seems like a good guy, I don't know him very well, but he's always presented really well. I've heard, I heard him speak at something. you know,
thank
it's
you.
that sort of thing,
Thank
you know,
you.
around the kind of thing. No, take it. But it's that kind of thing where somebody's gonna vouch for you, you know. You don't want a situation where maybe a group of decision makers are sitting around a table and they're trying to decide, okay, we've got this amazing, fantastic multinational project. Who do we want to work on this? And for somebody to sort of, maybe the line manager say, well, you know, I don't want to, you know, I want to recommend Enoch for it. And everyone says, who's Enoch? You know, or, you know, doesn't have enough of a, you know, I mean, the worst would be that they think, no, definitely not Enoch, because I know him really well and he does a terrible job. Like, that's obviously the worst scenario. But, you know, the middle ground would be that they just don't even know who you are. But actually what you want is for people to say, oh, yes, great, Enoch's fantastic, you know, I want to really, you know, see him do well, he really deserves it, all that kind of thing. I mean, this is literally the kind of conversation that I've been party to over the years in different groups, different organizations, where we're making decisions about who's going to get, you know, that promotion or that amazing project or that new opportunity or a bonus or a pay rise or whatever it is. And having the sponsors in the room are as important, you know, and that is also part of networking, which is really important to understand. It isn't always as obvious, you know, it's all very sort of cloak and dagger, it feels like sometimes, but, you know, having this knowledge is really important.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. At least that's my takeaway, having a sponsor.
Yeah.
But Alia, there's also, you know, a lot of myth about building your professional network, especially in this social media age. So some people feel nervous, you know, striking the conversation with people face to face to build that network. So some have resorted to, you know, hiding behind cameras and then be doing it on social media, which I know has its own advantages and disadvantages. But my point has to do with LinkedIn versus Facebook, Instagram, and what have you. I've spoken to some students and even professionals, you know, they don't want to go on LinkedIn, you know, to establish connections and what have you. They think LinkedIn is too serious. And if you want to connect to Alia on LinkedIn, it will be hello, hi. But once they get to Facebook and Instagram, it becomes a little bit informal. And that is where you can get yourself into the hobbies of those people. And once you get into their hobbies, you can establish this professional relationship quite faster. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really it's a really interesting question. I mean, I think maybe I'm perhaps of the older generation where for me, you know, it's about you kind of almost have you try to have a balance between work and life, you know, as we all do. And actually, I would be saying that LinkedIn for me personally is you know a work forum. You know, it's a fantastic forum. You know, again, not something we had when I was starting out. But you know, you've got that LinkedIn, which is very much work focused, and then everything else, all the other social media pieces are very much non-work. For me personally, you know, there'll be colleagues that I've worked with, that, you know, contacts in my network who I am connected with outside of LinkedIn on the social media, but that is, you know, because I feel I have a social relationship with them. It's not because I, you know, leverage the work piece there. So I would personally say that, you know, unless you have a very good sort of work relationship, and not necessarily that you work with them, but that you've established a relationship on a professional side, that you would then maybe, if it's appropriate, to sort of look at it from the kind of non-work perspective. But I wouldn't personally adopt that approach. You know, if you have no contact with somebody, you know, and, you know, for example, anybody here, you know, if you're not linked in with me on LinkedIn, and then, you know, somehow you come across me on social media and you think, oh yes, I know Alia, she's from BP, and connect with me there with the intention of it being a work, but I don't know, I would find that, I'm not sure how I would think about that. You know, it would be not necessarily a bad thing, but it would just be not conventional from my perspective. But maybe I'm a little traditional, a little bit old school on these sorts of things. So I don't know. I'm willing to be corrected. But I think the key thing is here that you know, LinkedIn is incredibly important. You know, I'd encourage everybody to have a LinkedIn profile. You know, even if, you know, you just, you know, a university student haven't necessarily kind of, you know, as in an undergraduate, I mean, rather than, you know, haven't necessarily kind of got a lot of you know, a long sort of history to sort of put on there, even if it's, you know, just to follow other people, see what other people are talking about, see what they're posting about. I mean, you know, for myself, I learned so much on LinkedIn just by seeing what other people are, you know, what the conversation is about, what the hot topics are of the day. But also, I think that if you do then link in with somebody on LinkedIn, and I get this myself a lot, you know, you get a request, you get, I get like, you know, every week I get maybe, you know, another 10 requests or something, you know. So it's quite a lot, you know, you're busy, you've got a busy work, you've got other things in your life, you know. So to kind of keep on track of that. But the thing is that if I just get a LinkedIn request from somebody I've never met, from somebody I have no connection with, and there's no message there, you know, I'm less inclined to accept that, you know. But equally, if somebody, you know, maybe if I have met them at an event and then they subsequently link with me, great, I'm happy to accept that. But then, you know, follow it up. You know, if it's somebody that you're making connection with because you want to have, you know, that's an important connection to you, you want to have hopefully some sort of relationship ongoing, then follow it up with a message. You know, oftentimes as well, I've messaged people in response, especially more junior people, where they've contacted me and I've said, you know, oh, I really enjoyed meeting with you. You know, really pleased that you've reached out to connect with me on LinkedIn. Anytime you want, let me know. I'm always happy to have a chat. You know, if I offer that, if I make that kind of offer, if somebody and other people make that kind of offer, take it up. You know, the number of times I kind of put that out there and actually I don't get a response back because, you know, maybe they just don't want to talk to me. I don't know. But, you know, they reached out to me to LinkedIn. So I'm thinking they kind of want to have some relationship. But it's almost like they've just kind of, you know, they've gone to an event and maybe they met 4 or 5 people or whatever the number is. Then they sat down at home or on the train home or whatever, gone through LinkedIn and just be like, tick, 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 here are all the people I met and just connected with them. Great. Yeah. What are you going to do about that? You know, actually, if you've met that person, you've contacted them, you've had a conversation with them, you know, make it more of a message, you know, just, I think that can have quite a dramatic impact on people. And then even if you have nothing further to meaningfully say, because you know, nobody wants continuous messages about nonsense. You know, if there's nothing to say, it's fine. You don't have to, you know, but yeah. just make it meaningful. But, you know, even if it's maybe 6 months, even a year later, and say, you know, I don't know if you'll remember, but we spoke at this event, you know, I messaged you, I just wanted to get your views on whatever it is, then that kind of gives you a much better foundation to have that conversation later.
Okay, so it's over 20 years in the governance space. What would you say has been the best thing working in governance? And if you mind to tell me the worst, I would also want to hear that.
Well, what's the best thing? I think the best thing might be, well, look, I've worked with some fantastic people. So, you know, I've been very, very privileged, you know, working at really high, you know, really, really high performing organizations with really high caliber people around me. But, you know, you have a lot of contact. So working in governance, you have a lot of contact with the board and with very senior stakeholders right from day one, you know, depending on the role. Maybe it's not day 1, maybe it's day 20, maybe it's day 300. I don't know. But, you know, early on in your career, much earlier than everybody else. So you really, as I said, that bird's eye view of the organization. And that feels very, very strange sometimes because, you know, especially early in your career, you kind of like, I've got a lot to learn. I'm still new at this and getting to understand what I'm doing. Yet you're getting exposure to the people at the top and you're kind of hearing and understanding what's going on. So the way I see it is that governance, you know, one of the best things about governance, you know, and I can only speak working in the corporate sector because that's been my career to date. Yeah. But, you know, you're at the top of the organization and you're in the middle of that top. So, you know, at the top of the organization, you have the board, you have, you know, HR function, you have finance function, you have, you know, all sorts of other departments, depending on what the industry is and all the rest of it. But those core functions at the top, and then it's governance that links everybody. So, you know, we have more interaction and contact with all these different teams. And then we are the link up to the board. And that is just incredibly privileged. So for me, that definitely has been, you know, a real privilege, a really fascinating, constantly evolving, exciting, interesting experience to be involved with. I think in terms of what is the bad side of things, what's the worst thing, I think it would be, you know, it is a very hard, it's a very tough job. It's a tough life. But, you know, for me, I absolutely love my job. And over the years, so many people I've worked with all say the same thing. They absolutely love their job, love what we do, love the impact we have. You know, you work on things, you're seeing it on the front page of the FT. It's exciting. You know, you feel like you're in the thick of it. But it is very demanding in terms of, you know, you need that resilience. You need to be able to kind of, cope with things. You need to manage your own energy levels, very long hours working. You know, you don't get a lot of sleep sometimes if it's at the peak busy periods. and you just gotta keep yourself going. So there's so it's kind of the rough with the smooth, but it's I think it's a really fantastic career. And I know also I've got colleagues that were studying with me, that went into law and became sisters, for example, or barristers, or various other careers. And then some of them have actually cross-qualified as governance professionals because you have that opportunity that as a company secretary of a company, you're in the boardroom. Right now, as I'm registered a Companies House for BP because I have signing authority. None of my legal colleagues have that because they are legal advisors. They don't have authority on behalf of the board. So from a governance perspective, it's quite a privilege again, to be in that position. So it is. I just think it's quite interesting that I took this governance path, and then I had colleagues, friends that went to stay on the legal path, and then we kind of met back in the middle because they've kind of come back on this side because it gives them the dual qualifications, very valuable. But I'm happy being pure governance, and I wouldn't have had it any other way.
So let's narrow the conversation now. We're almost done to BP. How is BP governance like? I mean, we know it's a huge company. It's a company in oil and gas, FTSE 100 company. It looks like it's going to be a very tough, interesting, smooth, rough job.
Yes, well, I mean, thankfully, I've got a team here now, which I built up over since I joined, and I'm very pleased. I've got absolutely excellent individuals working in my team. Everybody really has just such a huge commitment to the role, to BP, and I think that's really important because it doesn't matter how good or bad I am. If the team is not good overall and not committed and not delivering, then there's only so much you can do as a leader. You need to have a good quality team. So that's really important. Once you get into that position of leadership, you need to have the right people. So I'm really pleased I've got that. And so, as a company of the scale of BP, it's a very, very complex organization. We have operations in so many different aspects. Obviously now, particularly the focus, the sort of long-standing historic focus on hydrocarbons, but also the new focus around the resilient hydrocarbons, and then also the focus around the renewable side. So really looking at our various sort of transition growth engines, as we refer to them, which is very broad ranging. So we've got sort of solar, we've got wind, offshore wind, onshore wind, we've got hydrogen facilities, we've got waste management facilities where they're turning literally landfill waste into energy. There's so much going on. We've got all the EV charging, we've got all the kind of customer facing elements with our petrol filling stations and all of that side, and the convenience. We've got we've basically got little grocery stores inside those. So it's such a wide range because you talk about the different industries. It's oil and gas, but it's much more than oil and gas. It's it's an integrated energy company. So an awful lot of different things there. And you talked about earlier around that kind of moving around different industries. Some of my experience working at Tesco, obviously, is the largest supermarket brand in the UK. That's been relevant here for BP because, as I said, we've got that convenience offering. So all these different, and then also the real estate piece. We have a lot of real estate because of the company we are, the scale, the footprint that we've got. Again, different bits of knowledge and information, and that's why you're in a real estate company. You learn about the real estate, you understand that business. So because you never know how it's going to be useful later. So that's all very, very complicated and very, very big. We have a very high profile, not only in the UK, but also globally. We also have multiple listings. So we've got a listing here in the London Stock Exchange, in London, here in the UK, but we also have a listing on the New York Stock Exchange over in the US. So we have SEC considerations to be aware of. We also have a listing in Germany, primarily on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange, but also on Hamburg and Düsseldorf. And then we have some legacy obligations in Japan as well, because we used to be listed on the Tokyo Stock Exchange. So from that perspective, there's a big global complex picture here. So an awful lot to be thinking about, a lot to be dealing with. And but we get a lot of scrutiny as well externally. We have a lot of people very interested in what BP is doing. Something that at another company, I know we would have done and no one would have taken any notice of. It really would have not been of any interest to anybody. But we do the same thing here at BP. Everybody's interested. Everybody wants to know, you know, all the paper, or media interest, all the sort of stakeholder interest. So we have to be very, very careful about, from a governance perspective, what are we doing? What are the decisions we're taking? How are we, you know, going to, you know, how is this going to be perceived? So that aspect is also a real additional layer that we need to be considerate of, which is, again, you know, for me personally and for the team that I've built up here, yeah, this is what we thrive with. You know, it adds to the excitement, to the fast-paced, you know, evolution, consistently changing, and the kind of different requirements that we have to meet. So it's all part of the exciting aspect of what we do.
Yeah. Okay. My last question, and then I move over to the questions on the Q&A. I'm excited to tell our audience that BP has a governance graduate program, which I know would be, I don't know how soon it will be open, but I know 2024 September, you would be embracing the next set of cohorts. So if someone is looking forward to applying for the governance graduate program, what is your advice? Top tips? All the secrets, Alia, all the secrets, yeah. Exclusive secrets.
Well, you know, obviously we have to run we run a very fair, robust process. You know, we will get a lot. Based on the experience we had last time, we will have a lot of interest in this role. And as I said, unfortunately, we only have one position, but it's a great position because it's you know, it's one person in that role. It's going to have a lot of focus, a lot of opportunity. So, you know, I definitely encourage anybody who's interested in a corporate governance role, you know, to consider applying. The sort of launch of that will be happening very, very soon, sort of the next month or so. And then, as I said, you know, it will be for a September 2024 start. But leading up to that, there will be a process of various stages that individuals have to go through. So, you know, I think it's all the things that I've already mentioned. You know, it's about demonstrating your understanding of governance, because as a starting point, you know, a lot of people don't really understand what a governance career involves. Yeah, a lot of people be quite familiar with like a legal career or with other professions, but governance is you know, is a bit more nuanced. Is a little bit under the radar for the average person on the street. So really do your homework. But you know, it's great if you have all that knowledge. Great. You got to demonstrate it. You got to put it on the page, you know, for your application. And when you get to the interview, you need to talk about it. You need to demonstrate what you know and how you know it. And I think that's key. You know, not only what do you know, but how did you find that out? How did you learn about that? You know, what motivated you? What additional effort have you gone to try and educate yourself and inform yourself about what the governance professional does? And then, you know, really think in advance carefully, you know, when you're doing a written application, but also, you know, when you're preparing for any interviews, to really be thinking about, okay, well, what anecdotes can I draw on? Because, you know, and in each case, at each stage, you would obviously get a steer as to what will be required, what types of questions you've got. But at the point at which you're going to be asked, give us scenario-based examples of where you've applied different things, you know, really think about that in advance. You do not want to be thinking about it for the first time in that interview. You know, plan it out, think about it, you know, and test it out. You know, you got to get used to talking, you know, especially at this sort of entry level. Maybe you haven't had a lot of interviews. You know, maybe you haven't kind of, you know, honed those skills. I think the key thing is, you know, practice. You know, so practice with a family, friend member, whoever is around. Just get used to telling your story. But the key thing I would say, and this applies whether you're your entry level role or whether you're, you know, when I next apply for a job, whenever that might be, you know, not for a while, hopefully, but you know, the key thing is, for a corporate role, go and read the annual report. You know, go and read the annual report, read the governance section, because there's always a governance section, and familiarize yourself with it as much as you can. And what I mean by that is not memorizing everything, and maybe some of it's not going to make a lot of sense. That's fine. Don't worry about those things if they don't make sense. Think about the things that do make sense, or the things that you can work through and try and understand. And then you need to, I always think about it, almost picture yourself that you already work at that company. You know, how do they talk? So what do they put in their governance report and their annual report generally? How do they talk about themselves? How do they talk about the different divisions? So, for example, at BP, you know, you say, okay, in the industry, we talk about oil and gas. At BP, we talk about resilient hydrocarbons. You know, that's our language, if you like. So it's those sorts of things, and it doesn't matter what company is, what industry is, there'll always be things about how that company talks about their area. So you're kind of learning their jargon, their language, and it's that, and you want to go the extra mile. Every one of the major organizations, they'll have a website, right? They'll have little video clips. They'll have their leaders, whether it's a CEO or other board members, whoever it is, talking about their organization, talking about key things that maybe have happened. Listen to how they talk about it, kind of understand. Imagine you're working there, imagine you're talking that same language, so you can pick up the phraseology, the references, and then as I said, demonstrate that in the way that you talk about in your interview, in your application. But it's got to sound authentic. So don't just kind of copy and paste a load of stuff and just dump it in there. If you don't understand it, don't bring it up. You've got to be able to kind of have a degree of understanding. And it might not be the in depth, like right down to the ground, but if you've got enough of a handle of what it is, talk about it, and even say, I understand that this is the situation about this. I would love to know more about it, because I don't know it in detail, but I would love to find out more. So just be authentic.
No room for chat GPT answers copy and pastes.
Oh my goodness, no, absolutely not. No, that would be very disappointing. And I give you one example in terms of that kind of the technical opportunities. So during COVID, or coming out of COVID, I was interviewing for a role, and I had a candidate, and obviously it was being done over Teams, because we weren't allowed to sort of meet in person at that point. And I felt very, very upset because we asked a question, we had a panel, we asked a question, the candidate, wanted a moment to think about it, and that's fine. If you have a question, you need to just absorb it, you need to just reflect. If you just say, I just need a moment to reflect on that, that's absolutely fine, absolutely fine. But we had a candidate, and she was saying, oh, let me just reflect on that. And you could see her eyes like bringing up the right bit of text or the right bit of whatever she'd prepared. And it felt so disingenuous, really disingenuous. And I mean, she's a great candidate in every other respect. That to me, don't pretend, don't lie, don't pretend, don't be something you're not. You've got to be authentic. It's really important.
Okay, thank you very much. So I have a question from Rebecca. She's an MSc governance student, and she says, how have you dealt with managing board level behaviors that could be problematic? What is your approach, and what do you feel is the most important factor for you to come out unscathed with no problem, not stepping on toes? And
yeah. I mean, that's I mean, thankfully, that is not a day one responsibility for any graduate. So let's just put that out there. That's kind of you've got many years under your belt, hopefully, by the time you have to get involved with this sort of thing. But when you do, because you do at some point, it's all about influencing skills, and what are the relationships that you've built with the different stakeholders. So if there is a problematic issue emerging, especially around behaviours, there needs to be the opportunity that as a governance professional in the room, you've got the relationship with, typically the chair of the board, but also the senior independent director, any other key directors, so that you have the credibility to make people listen to what you're saying. And if you can see there's a problem there, you need to be able to demonstrate to other people, why is this a problem? You need to surface it. You need to help other people see what is going on, if perhaps they're not admitting it, or they're not recognizing it, whatever it is. So influencing and relationships, and that is kind of the foundation of that is the networking as well, which we talked about earlier.
Yeah. Okay. There's another question from Raymond. He says, I think he's from a law background. He says, please, what kind of certification course would you recommend for someone with a legal background hoping to venture into corporate practice?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm not going to pretend I'm in the detail of all the different pathways nowadays, because I kind of mentioned a few times. It's 20 years since I did it all, so I'm sure it's changed, but I know it has changed. But what I would say is, the Corporate Governance Institute, which I'm very closely involved with, that is the professional institute. It's a chartered governance institute for the governance profession. There's a wealth of information on there. Really make use of that. There's a lot of details on there around, especially if you have a legal background, as to how you can take advantage of that. So, for example, you know, if you have a legal qualification or even, you know, certain, you know, have studied a certain amount of law previously, when you come to do the exams around the governance piece, then, you know, you have exemptions, right? So that's one example, but there are others around how it can benefit you. But I said that I really recommend the Governance Institute website for further information about what the opportunities are there. But also I'd say if you've got a legal background, you know, think about it on a kind of individual level. How are you going to leverage that knowledge? Well, it's incredibly useful. I mean, it's not a barrier. If you don't have a law degree, it's not a barrier to being a successful governance professional. But if you do have that legal background, actually that really does, you know, there are certain things you're going to be better at. There's certain things you're going to be less well at, because a governance mindset is very different to a legal mindset, and don't let anybody tell you that it's not, because it is. But with the governance mindset, you know, and having the benefit of legal, you know, legal analysis, understanding statute, how does precedent work, those sorts of things are helpful for a governance role. So, you know, there's plenty benefits there, plenty of reasons to talk about having a legal background. But just, you know, I recommend the institute would be a good way to help understand the actual routes and the certification piece.
Exactly. And the good news is we also run an MSc governance program, so you maybe want to explore that as well, Raymond. Okay, the last question is from Abdullah from Saudi Telecom Group. He says, what are your views on the most important aspects of subsidiary governance?
Yeah, I mean, look, subsidiary governance is incredibly important. You know, if you look at a lot of the sort of corporate scandals that have happened over the years at many different organizations, you know, they don't typically happen at the PLC level. You know, PLCs usually, there's a lot of focus on that internally. There's a lot of support. There's a lot of, you know, process and policy around it. It's actually, you know, at a subsidiary level. So, you know, I joined Tesco shortly after there'd been the emergence of the need for a very, very high-profile SFO, so serious fraud office investigation into some of the accounting misstatements that were made there. You know, and there have been many, many other examples. But, you know, so Tesco, for example, and this is all in the public domain, you know, that was at a subsidiary level. It was the accounts at a subsidiary level, but they were very material for the overall group numbers. So, you know, subsidiary governance, really, really important. You know, it's it's a great opportunity to, if you're working in subsidiary governance, to get some experience around managing subsidiary boards, kind of that board and dynamics piece we talked about, minuting experience, servicing, you know, the subsidiary governance at that level can be very, very beneficial. If you ultimately want to kind of get to the PLC level in a corporate setting, then honing your skills at the subsidiary level can be very helpful for kind of transferring over to the PLC boardroom level. But beyond that, as a whole, as I mentioned, you know, problems can happen anywhere in an organization. Governance at the subsidiary level is just as important, I would say, personally, as at the PLC level. It's a whole organization.
Okay. Last question before I hand over to Nikki, who will come and say, give us our thank yous. Anything you wish you had known earlier at the start of your governance career?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, where do I start? Gosh, where do I start? I mean, I think for me personally, it's probably more actually around the sort of behaviors piece. I think would have been really helpful to know, because I mean, from my experience, you know, I've you know, my heritage is you know, from Pakistan. My parents came over, didn't have a lot of education, you know, so I consider myself socially mobile as well. It's another thing that here at BP is very well supported in terms of celebrating that diversity of background. But you know, what is that kind of, where has that positioned me? I think it's about, you know, it's probably been a little harder for somebody from my background to understand how best to network, how best to leverage those relationships, how best to influence people, and to develop those soft skills. You know, and not because my parents were fantastic, great people, but, you know, for example, had they had kind of corporate careers themselves, they may have had more direct support and advice they could have given me, in more kind of direct sort of you know, support and dealing with situations. Instead, I had to work out a lot of that, you know, without that kind of level of support. And this is where mentors come in, you know, really, really important. The sort of sponsorship piece, getting those sponsors to be able to vouch for you, to speak up for you, all of that becomes even more important. But for me personally, I didn't have all of that at the outset. So it's something I've had to learn and develop as I've gone along. But I think, you know, all of that, and then I think I think it's nobody ever tells you at the start of your governance career that you I don't know you seem to work harder than everybody else in the organisation. And I mean, I say that, and I'm sure there's people out there who are working, lots of people working very, very hard. But I think, you know, and this is not just at BP, this has been in many companies over the years. We've always sort of, we look around, who's left in the office on a Friday night? It's just the governance professionals. It's just the governance team. And you know, we have a lot of fun as well. We have a lot of fun. We work very hard. So it's that work hard, play hard piece, which, as I said, we all love. And you're not there every Friday night. We do go out and have some, you know, we do go out and enjoy ourselves, spend time with our families, all the rest of it. But yeah, it's just such a privileged career to have. You know, I just can't recommend it high enough. If that's what you want, you know, go into it with your eyes open. It's not for everybody. Yeah.
Alia, it has been very interesting having and hosting you for the launch of this special careers event. And personally, I want to say thank you. I know Nikki would have a lot of thank yous to say to you. And on behalf of the audience, University of Lincoln, we want to say a big thank you. So over to Nikki.
Thank you, Enoch, and thank you so much, Alia. Such an amazing start to the governance series, to hear your insight into areas as diverse as your own background. And I think a lot of our students will have enjoyed hearing about the important skills that will really be able to help them as they make their first steps in governance. Really interesting to learn a little bit more about what governance professionals do, because I know that's always an interesting area for our students. We've got several thanks coming in over the chat. So Urs, for example, has just said many thanks for an authentic and interesting exchange, which I think is a really great summary of our conversation. So thank you very much. Rebecca's also said how interesting the session has been. So thank you very much for everything and for a really enlightening conversation.
Great. Well, as I said, thank you very much for having me. It's been a real pleasure, and I really hope that this has been useful for all those attending. You know, I wish you all the very, very best. And if governance is the route you want to take, I wish you all the best. But if it's not, then that's absolutely fine. It's not for everybody. But just, you know, make the best of the opportunities you've got. You know, what more can any of us do? So yeah, thank you very much again for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for joining us today. We hope you've enjoyed the event. It's been great to see so many of you join us for this first governance series. If you would like to find out more about MSc Governance at the University of Lincoln, please use the QR code, visit our prospectus and learn more. And don't hesitate to contact me. I'm Nikki Wood, I'm the programme leader, and you can contact me at nwood@lincoln.ac.uk. Finally, please keep an eye open for future editions of the governance series. Be advertised on our social channels, so do connect, and we hope to see you all again soon. So thank you very much and goodbye.